We're back up and running again. Okay. So here's how we're doing this. I'm just going to pick up and do another one. That only took 9 minutes. Use your judgment about how many of the bullet points you need to write down. You don't have to write down every single one. The assignment's going to be to summarize, what we've learned about. And I'm going to try to get this one done in about 10 minutes, too. If I can get through, the nuts and bolts of kind of the courts, next week we're on civil liberties, which is really where we want to be. Civil liberties, civil rights the last 3 weeks or so. Okay, so let me just jump right here. All right. Okie doke. So remember, we just got through saying, there's a majority opinion, a dissenting opinion, a concurring opinion, a plurality opinion. The Chief Justice decides who writes the opinion if he's in the majority. If he's not the most senior member, the member who's been on the court the longest, who's in the majority, decides who writes the opinions. A lot of times the chief will decide to write the opinions himself. Earl Warren was in the majority and wrote the Brown versus Board of Education opinion. These opinions are really important because they serve as precedents that have to be followed by all the rest of the courts in the country. So once Topeka, Kansas couldn't segregate schools, nobody else could either. Right? Other courts had to follow that precedent. The word precedent means proceed. Okay. We got our third Latin phrase, stare decisis, means the decision stands. So courts have to follow precedent. It's gotten to be controversial. In the 30s, up to the 1930s, only about 5% of the cases involved the Bill of Rights. Today, about half of them do. Those Bill of Rights. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech. Those kind of things you'll see tend to be pretty controversial. Today, about half of the court cases are about these topics. All right, and so the idea was they'd be on there forever because they'd be above politics. But because they're controversial, that their decision is really controversial because they're precedent for all the other cases on these controversial topics. So, here we got another situation in which the government doesn't quite function the way the founders thought it would. All right, so number 2. All right, okay, so the rest of this one's going to be about how you get on there. We got a little film about Clarence Thomas I think is really interesting film. All right, a federal judge got to be nominated by the president, confirmed by the Senate. There's Sonia Sotomayor when President Obama announced that, he was nominating her. Obama nominated Lena Kagan and Sotomayor. Trump has nominated Gorsuch and Kavanaugh last fall. Not this last fall, but the fall of 2018. Okay, it's become a really, really partisan process. Republicans started delaying a lot of Clinton's nominations way back in the 90s. Democrats did the same thing to Bush in the early 2000s, going so far as to filibuster nominations. So it wasn't always a partisan process, but just like everything else, it's become a real partisan process. Okay, judges, of course, are going to try to appoint judges that agree, presidents, I'm sorry, going to try to appoint judges that agree with them. But you've got several times where the judge ends up being more liberal than the president thought the judge was going to be. Most famously, Republican President Eisenhower nominated Republican governor of California, Earl Warren, to be on the Supreme Court. He ended up being the most liberal Chief Justice ever. Bush, a Republican, nominated this fellow Souter, who was also ended up being a pretty liberal judge. All right, the success rate is about 75% for Supreme Court nominees, 98% of cabinet nominees. Judges going to be on there for a long time, so the success rate's not quite as high. Bush nominated this lady, Harriet Miers. W nominated her. When people started kind of looking into her, they found out like her chief qualification was she was friends with Bush, so he had to withdraw the nomination. All right, there it is. All right, so the criteria. All right, hey, they want somebody who's been a judge. They want somebody competent. Ideology, the Democrats want somebody pretty liberal. Republicans want somebody conservative. Rewards. They've done loyal party service for a long time. There's a couple of examples of that. And then religion. You know, Catholic's kind of a swing vote, so there's more Catholic. I think something like 7 or 8 of the 9 judges on the court are Catholic. All right, race, ethnicity, and gender makes a difference. There's been 2 African American. Politics plays into it. So Johnson nominated the first African American, Thurgood Marshall. Bush nominated Clarence Thomas, the current African American on there, and we're going to be looking at him. There's 4 women. O'Connor was nominated by Reagan. She was the first woman. 3 women on the Supreme Court today: Ginsburg, Sotomayor, and Kagan. Ginsburg here is 87 years old, so everybody's kind of watching her health very closely. All right, so there's that one. There's a little acronym. Pause it for a second if you need to. All right, and then here's the process. All right, so we'll go over this right quick. Then I'll send you a film. The film on the process with Clarence Thomas, really, really fascinating, I think. Nominations go to the Senate Judiciary Committee. Once upon a time, Joe Biden was the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee back when H.W. Bush was the president. All right, the ABA, remember that interest groups, the American Bar Association, will rate the nominees as highly qualified, qualified, not qualified. They almost always get highly qualified. All right, then they get vetted. The nominee fills out a questionnaire. The Senate will look into things they've done in the past, their speeches, articles they've written, what they believe, interviews they've given. All right, and then interest groups will lobby for and against the nomination. The Judiciary Committee have this hearing, and they ask judges, tough questions. The judges tend to dodge the questions. Reagan nominated this extremely conservative judge named Bork, and back in the 80s, and when they asked him questions, he gave them straight answers, and it killed his nomination. So ever since then, judges kind of give politicians answers to a lot of the questions. They'll say, well, I can't tell you exactly how I'd rule. It would depend on the situation. Something like that. All right, so then the Judiciary Committee makes its recommendation, goes to the full Senate, the Senate votes on it. All right, so there it is. Once again, that might be a little bit more than 10 minutes, but around about 10 minutes. So you got a 10-minute deal, a 10-minute deal. Write down what you gotta, and then I'm sending you this Clarence Thomas video.